David is the psalmist today in that very short Psalm 133, who writes, "How wonderful, how beautiful when families get along, when siblings are in unity." I couldn't agree more. But getting along doesn't mean that there's no conflict, that everyone agrees on everything all the time. To get along means working out our conflicts. It means we clash and we figure things out. We disagree and we work through it. We make mistakes and apologize and forgive and let it go. It is not always easy. But I have to brag about my baby for a minute, and I'm pretty sure she just woke up from a nap, so maybe you'll hear her while I brag about her. And she's not even a baby anymore, guys. 15 months. She is more of a toddler and more of a little child every day. She has the most incredible capacity for forgiveness, more than anyone else in our house. I know this because a few weeks ago, Philip tried to slam a cabinet shut in the kitchen. I instinctively stuck out my hand to stop it because it nearly hit Annabelle. Unfortunately, the child lock on the cabinet hit me. And even though Philip apologized immediately, I stood there lecturing him, so angry as my finger throbbed and bled. Even in the moment, I knew I was being ridiculous, overreacting because of the pain. But I was angry and I did not want to forgive quickly. Annabelle, on the other hand, she forgives so readily. Philip, he's 4, in case some of you haven't even met him. He does not have a ton of self-control yet. He plays a little too rough, and so Annabelle gets hurt a lot. And I'll hold her as she's crying after whatever Philip has done in his wildness that has caused her to be hurt. And meanwhile, Philip is getting in trouble. If he starts crying because he's in trouble, even if Annabelle is still crying, even if she's still hurt, she stops crying immediately, jumps off my lap, and runs to find Philip to check on him. Now, our kids believe that ice packs solve every hurt in the world, including hurt feelings. And so sometimes she stops by the freezer to pick up an ice pack for him. Whatever hurt Philip has just caused her is immediately forgiven. She has forgotten and moved on. She just wants to be sure that he is okay and to take care of him. It is astonishing, this incredible capacity to just let it go. I know she hasn't learned it from me and my example. Perhaps it's just the natural tendency of children, or it's just who she is, who God made her to be. Whatever the source, her grace amazes me. Our journey to seek a hopeful and hope-filled Lent began with the practice this week of letting go and moving on. Our family decided to start this practice early because we needed some extra practice over here. Also, because being able to practice forgiveness, we need to also practice saying sorry. And the practice asks us to respond to the words, "I'm sorry," by saying, "Thank you for your apology." And it's hard to practice that very often if no one is saying the words, "I'm sorry," very often. 11 months into the pandemic, those are words that we should probably be saying a lot, but we maybe aren't saying them as often as we should be. It's sort of, I decided, like a chicken and egg situation, because I realized that it would be much, much easier to apologize more often if we could trust that the grace and forgiveness was readily waiting for us. If an apology is met too often with anger and a lecture, it's not so easy to apologize. If, on the other hand, an apology is met with grace and forgiveness, it's much easier to admit our mistakes. On Ash Wednesday, we wrote down our hurts and our griefs, our losses and sources of sadness. In our house, we only took a few minutes to do this, with the small children and the short attention spans over here. But even in just a few minutes, our lists were long. It's so easy to come up with all the hurts and losses this year. Birthday parties, friends, hugs, school, recess, holiday traditions, on and on our lists went. From big to small, so many losses. Then we burned them to make ash, to remind us of our mortality. As we burned them, I read the words from the prophet Isaiah. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your needs in parched places and make your bones strong. And you shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water whose waters never fail. Your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to live in. I've always loved this image of the repairer of the breach, mending the brokenness. Even ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. If your households or your close relationships have felt particularly strained this year, you're not alone. No matter how desolate it feels, it can be rebuilt. To mend the breach, to heal the broken places, we can both apologize and extend grace. Joseph and his brothers have a relationship that is about as broken as any relationship could be. Joseph was the favorite son, and in his youth, he did not hesitate to proudly celebrate this fact. His brothers, in malice and jealousy, stop short of killing him, and they sell him as a slave instead. Joseph suffers the loss of his home, his family, his safety, and his very self. Though he has survived and even risen to power, his experience in Egypt is traumatic. The verses we read from Genesis today show the amazing gift of forgiveness. It is not something that Joseph comes to quickly or easily. In the story leading up to these verses, Joseph has tricked his brothers, imprisoned them, manipulated them. Despite the years that have passed and the success Joseph has achieved, I wonder if Joseph still feels a desire for revenge. He hides away in a different verse, overcome by emotions. Most certainly love, but maybe also grief and anger and relief and joy and sadness and hope. All that he thought he had lost is possibly before him once again. But the brokenness of the past is also brought to the forefront. This moment where Joseph begins to repair the breach between them comes after many weeks of internal conflict for Joseph. He weeps. In joy or sorrow or anger or all of it overwhelming him, we don't really know. And yet he moves toward his brothers. He takes the first step of letting go of the division between them. It is not simple or complete. It is not perfect or neat and clean. It is a messy forgiveness, messy grace. And yet, it begins to repair the breach. He is courageous in loving his brothers who may not love him back. He risks relationship where he has been hurt before. Our narratives of forgiveness, even and especially in the church, need to acknowledge some important nuances. Joseph has suffered tremendous abuse at his brother's hands. This abuse is different than simply being hurt by another person. Joseph forgives the abuse. He does so, however, when he is no longer under their power. Joseph, in fact, has power over them now. Who has power is of extreme importance. Demanding or even encouraging grace and forgiveness after an abuse, if the one abused is still powerless before the abuser, even if that abuser has apologized, that is not the story we are reading here. While such forgiveness is possible, it is even more complicated, even more fraught than what we see between Joseph and his brothers. The words Joseph speaks, "Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life." What the brothers meant as harm, God has transformed into good. This sentiment can only be spoken by Joseph and by no one else. Not even someone close to Joseph, a friend of his. Only Joseph can choose to frame his experience in this way. The place Joseph has arrived at here, where it is possible for him to reach out to his brothers in love and grace, such forgiveness is a process. Even after these verses, we see the forgiveness is still in process. The brothers will question whether Joseph really and completely has forgiven them. Perhaps they cannot forgive themselves. And Joseph continues to be courageous in his love and continues to seek to repair this breach with grace. Together, they have a long process of rebuilding trust and relationship. It is messy. Because forgiveness is messy, grace is messy. And it takes courage on our part to take steps of trusting and loving when we have hurt or been hurt by another. Each time Annabelle moves so readily toward grace and forgiveness, toward loving and caring for her brother instead of soothing or stoking her own pain, I am moved by her childlike wisdom and courage, moved to keep practicing forgiveness and grace because I know I need grace as much, if not more, than I'm asked to give it. Because I know God gives grace even more readily than my baby does. And for wrongs that are so much bigger than running in the house and playing too rough. Some parts of me feel hardened by the ways we've been just trying to survive this past year of pandemic life. Forgiveness asks us to soften, which requires its own strength, to open, which requires courage, to let go. And this practice opens the door to hope this Lent, that nothing is beyond grace. Nothing is stronger than love. The spark of the divine in each of us holds a tremendous capacity for grace, for one another and for ourselves, if we only courageously reach toward love. Amen.